Welcome to the Friday Happy Hour with victory strategist, award-winning author and your happy hour host, Annmarie Kelly. Each week, Annmarie chats with women who have reinvented, started over or wrote fabulous next chapters. They share how they overcame their midlife challenges and how you can too. So kick back with some good happy hour something to drink and enjoy today's show.
You're listening to the Friday Happy Hour with me, Annmarie Kelly, and I'm that recovering good girl, and your victorious woman empowerment partner. And this is where us victory chicks and you men who care about us meet on Fridays to chat about things we can do to overcome our challenges, get empowered, and make our lives sparkle. Thanks for joining me again at Happy Hour. Do you know who Lisa Loving Dalton is? I'll bet you don't know her. But I'll bet you've seen her in some of your favorite movies. Lisa was a stunt double, and she's done stunts in movies and on TV, and doubled for some people like Cher, Meryl Streep, Darryl Hannah, and so many more. She has some good stories that she talks about in her book, Falling for the Stars. And also, she figured out that some of the things she learned doing stunts translates to real life, to the stuff you and I can use. So Lisa's joining us today. You know, the news was so crazy this week that I don't even know where to begin. I mean, the stuff in Congress and healthcare is ridiculous. And this new White House director, this Anthony Scaramucci guy, and his use of the F-bomb, wasn't happy. Last month, it was New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand who dropped the F-bomb during a speech she was giving at NYU. Now, you know, it's one thing if you want to use that word in private, and apparently Scaramucci thought the conversation he was having with the reporter was off the record. But still, you know what I think? I don't care for Anthony Scaramucci or Senator Gillibrand or DNC Chair Tom Perez, all of whom have used coarse language from the platform. Well, not Scaramucci, but Gillibrand and Perez. Or President Trump. Or if you're some victory chick on Facebook. If you're in public, aren't you smart enough to think of better words to express yourself? And do you forget that you're being watched by people who are younger than you and looking at you as their role model? Or maybe not a role model, but just they model your behavior. You know, there's a dictionary filled with good words you can use. Ignorant thought is one of my favorites. And someone like the communications director or a United States senator surely should be able to find those words, don't you think? But that's not the stuff that got me so riled up this week. Here's what did. You know how everybody's so concerned about climate change and air pollution and noise pollution? I want to know why more people aren't as concerned about the consistent coarsening of our culture. Do you ever think about that? You know, the F-bomb is just one of those things. But here's another thing. This was the big one for me this past week. But wait, let me digress a minute because I have a point for it. Do you remember a movie called The Time Machine? And not the 2002 version, but the original one from 1960 with Rod Taylor and Yvette Mimieux. I think I'm saying her name right. Do you remember it? I'll bet some of you guys, even if you weren't old enough back then, you'll remember Yvette Mimieux. I saw her pictures and she was gorgeous. And she was in this movie, The Time Machine. I think she was one of those it girls. She was in the 1960s what Farrah Fawcett was in the 1980s. Anyway, when I was a kid, that Time Machine movie used to come on TV regularly. You know, before cable, when movies came on VHF and UHF channels late at night. Well, since I was TV addicted even back then, I watched that movie a lot. Whenever it came on, I tried to say it. It was based on an 1895 novella by H.G. Wells, who many people now think Wells was a visionary. It's surprising how many of the things he predicted over 100 years ago that actually became realities. Anyway, the guy who was the time traveler, played in that movie by Rod Taylor, goes into the future to some bizarre year, the year 1800,000. And when he gets there, he finds all the young people, all blondes dressed in white outfits, and they were called Eloi, were hanging out by water, having a good time, and engaged in a somewhat mindless chatter. As the time traveler watched, a young woman, her name was Weena, played by Yvette Mimieux, slips into the water and starts to drown. And nobody moves. They just watch her drowning. The time traveler is stunned. And he starts shouting at the couple, a couple of the Eloi men, who look at him like he's crazy. So he jumps in the water and saves the almost dead Weena. She is, of course, grateful, but all the other Eloi are scratching their heads, confused why the time traveler would risk his life to save someone he didn't even know. I was thinking about that scene in the time machine this week when I read about those 5 teenagers, ages 14 to 16, who saw a 32-year-old disabled man fall into a retention pond. And instead of going to help him or calling 911 or anything that might have saved his life, they harassed him and laughed at him as he drowned. Those kids were the man's only hope for life, and they did nothing. And the last thing that man heard was a bunch of teenagers mocking him. And those stupid kids, and stupid has to be the nicest word anything can use for them, actually filmed that man's drowning and posted it on social media. And in the clip, you can hear them in the background joking about the man coming up for air for the last time. That's really scary, don't you think? And it's like something from the Time Machine movie, except that it's not as far into the future as H.G. Wells portrayed in 1895. It's not the year 800,000. It's this year. And that's kind of scary. To me it is anyway. Maybe it doesn't bother you, but it scares me. And maybe I just watched that movie way too many times. But, and you and I know, every generation pushes the envelope a little further. You did it, I did it in our generations, but I don't know if it was like this. Do you think it was? Anyway, what those kids did so disturbed me that I talked with a communications person about it, and not Anthony Scaramucci. It was a woman I spoke to, and she told me that since those younger people have been using computers and the internet and stuff since they were little, it's had an impact on the way their brains are wired. And also, she said, social media has a lot to do with the inability of younger people to have that sense of human connection. You know, when you can self-censor what you say before you hit send, and when you live with the emotions of your life, through various emojis, then she kind of confirmed this, or said this in her own way, that when you're at work or a social gathering and you're actually looking at somebody and talking to them, and you find somebody, say, who doesn't agree with you or who disapproves of something you said or did, you just don't even know what to do with it. Well, those kids in Florida, they were arrested, but I don't think that they can be charged. Legally, they didn't do anything wrong. But morally and ethically, that's another story. So what do we do about it? I don't know if there's anything we can do except make bigger noises about what is right and what is wrong. And, of course, we don't always have control over that, do we? But the one thing you and I do have control over is us. We can choose to change our behavior. And we can do it with ourselves, with our kids. We can do it in our own families. We can raise the bar of what's acceptable behavior and what isn't. What do you think is one thing you can do differently? And that's, presume you see it the same way I do. And you want to do something differently. If you have something, a suggestion or an idea, go to today's radio wrap-up at victoriouswoman.com and comment, because I'd love to hear what you think. And also in today's radio wrap-up, I posted a couple links where I'm pretty sure you can watch The Time Machine for free. And I'm saying pretty sure because I started watching it yesterday, and it's posted in short segments, but like 5 or 6 minute segments, and then you'd have to watch it that way. The Eloy part is probably toward the middle because a lot of things happen to the time traveler before he finds his way back home. So take a look because it's very interesting. It's interesting to see how that man. I always liked that he got into this huge time machine and he had this lever that he pulled and it was like right in front of a big picture window and there was a store across the street so he could see by the year how fashions changed and stuff like that. But it's not till he gets to this wherever it is. It is where these Eloy and Morlock are. The Morlock are the opposite people from the Eloy. There's a whole big thing about how he almost doesn't get back to his regular time. And then it suggests at the very end that he doesn't stay, that he goes back. So it's all kind of pretty interesting. And the 2002 one just didn't have the same impact. But our guest, Lisa Loving Dalton, is here. Lisa was a stunt actor for years, and now she teaches lessons from what she learned as a stunt double for some pretty cool women. She teaches all of those lessons, and she has some neat stories, and she's here to share them with you. So go get some good happy hour, something to drink, and when you come back, well, I'll be here with Lisa Loving Dalton. You're listening to the Friday Happy Hour.
Remember when you wished you had more time for yourself, and now you have it, but you notice you're keeping busy with stuff, but that stuff isn't making you feel happy or filled up? And when you think about what would make you happy and filled up, you get stuck or feel overwhelmed. And then you go back to what's more familiar, more comfortable, even if it's not making you happy. Wouldn't you love to find a way to start making sense of that deep discontent you're feeling? Well, you're not alone. I'm Annmarie Kelly, author, victory strategist, and the radio show host of the Friday Happy Hour. And I know there's a place for you, one that other women have found to be both inspirational and empowering. And it's the Victorious Woman Project. Go there now and get on my mailing list, where you'll be the first to know about my upcoming online workshops, teleseminars, and more. And while you're there, take a couple minutes to look over my blog. You can download some of the free stuff I have for you and let it get your creative juices going. I'm looking forward to meeting you at the Victorious Woman Project. And that's at www.victoriouswoman.com.
Welcome back to the Friday Happy Hour. You're with me, Annmarie Kelly, and I'm here with our guest, Lisa Loving Dalton. Welcome to Happy Hour, Lisa.
Thank you, Annmarie. I'm really excited to be here.
No, I'm excited to have you here. Lisa, I got such a kick out of the stories you tell in Falling for the Stars, and it's called Falling for the Stars, A Stunt Gal's Tattletales. And they're fun, and I want you to share a couple with my listeners. But before I ask you about the famous people you fell for, I have a couple questions.
Okay.
What does a stunt double do?
Good question. So a stunt double is someone who undertakes the dangerous activities that a character in the story that's being filmed needs to go through. And in that case, the stunt player is being the body that is being seen by the audience when the dangerous event is happening, as opposed to the actual actor. There's also an area of stunts that is called nondescript, and that's where the stunt player is not actually doubling the character, the actor. They are sort of their own character. They could be the person on the street jumping out of the way when the stunt double for the star is driving, going to crash into them. So there's two kinds of stunt work, the doubling and the actual nondescript.
Well, when I was reading, I was amazed by, and you talk about this in a couple different places, how many calculations go into each stunt, including the physicality of the stunt double.
Absolutely, absolutely. For me, as a stunt player, I'm always approaching everything rather scientifically. So I really want to figure out what is the image that we want to convey through the camera, and how can I make that image as close to what we're looking for, the experience we want to give the audience. And so that can be logistically, how far is the trajectory if I fall from 30 feet or 50 feet, and where does the airbag need to be placed? Where is the camera going to be? Or if I'm going through a plate glass window, what is the end position that I want to look at? How high do I have to go in order to get the effect to be what we want it to be, as a dangerous looking or horrible looking, or as close to danger but escaping, like I dodged a train, for example. And how far do I need to get, how close do I need to get to the train to actually make it look like I'm about to get hit? So these things are important to understand, because I did one time get much closer to the train. The director kind of freaked out, came up to me, was like, "Lisa, come here, let me show you let me show you what this looks like. So you can be 10 feet further away from that train. You don't do that to me again, please."
Yeah. Well, but then there was another time when, and I can't remember what movie it was for and what the stunt was for, but it was with a fountain, and you did it once and it wasn't scary enough, and you did it twice and it wasn't scary enough. Do you remember which one I'm talking about?
Yes, we're talking about Splash.
Oh, that's right.
With Darryl Hannah. And Ronnie Howard, the director, was nervous that if I actually dove into the fountain that I might get hurt, or I might actually, if I make it so close. So the scene is in Splash. Tom Hanks has rescued Darryl Hannah from the museum fish tank, and he's put her into the BMW. They're racing to the water, down to the pier, and an army truck is chasing them. And they go straight across Columbus Circle. A balloon man dives out of the way of the BMW, and then the army truck comes right on the BMW's tail and almost hits a jogger. So that's me doing a nondescript job. And so Ronnie came up to me before the first take and said, "Oh, Lisa, please, don't make this close. In fact, you don't even have to dive into the fountain."
Because you dive into the fountain to get away from the car, right?
Yes, to get away from the army truck. So I did it, and I kept it pretty distant, and the cinematographer came over and was like, "Ronnie, come on, it's kind of boring here. Can we she's a pro, let her do her thing." And so he said, "Okay, Lisa, let's go again, but you can make it closer, but don't bother with going in the fountain. You don't need to do that." And of course, I want to go in the fountain. That's the fun part. And we go again, and the cinematographer is like, "Ronnie, come on, let's let her go in the fountain. Let her do a thing. It's just boring. Let's make this more exciting." So he looks at me, he says, "Okay, Lisa, go for the fountain." And by that time, I was really geared up. I'm all, okay, I really get to do something here. And I come around the corner, and the army truck comes faster, and it hits the curb, bouncing onto the fountain area. But when it hits the curb, it cracked the axle, and the truck came rolling to a stop at my feet, and I just kind of stepped away and did not go in the fountain because clearly it was not meant to be.
Oh, my goodness, Lisa.
No splash for me that day.
That's right. You dedicated this book to those who have fallen for the love of the craft. And then I'm listening to you, and I'm thinking, what makes you get into the stunt business?
I really was a very clumsy, klutzy child who fell down a lot. And And that led me to having to learn how to survive falling down a lot. And so I took dance and I took gymnastics and martial arts, and I became a physical theater artist with stage combat and the more avant-garde physical theater styles. And when I started to become interested in doing film, I got a job as a photo double. And the difference between a stunt double and a photo double is a photo double is not on a contract, which a stunt double is, and a photo double doesn't do dangerous things. They just look like the star. So they might be a passenger. They might be doubling the star from a long shot. You might see them walking in a crowd from a distance, that kind of thing. So it's not dangerous. But what I was doing was actually today would be on a stunt contract. We had not yet negotiated these rights. So at the time I was sitting in cars as other characters, either as Tina Louise from Gilligan's Island or Julie Haggerty from Airplane. So I was being a passenger in vehicles that were doing dangerous things. I just wasn't on a formal stunt contract because I wasn't the driver. And of course, eventually we convinced everybody that if you're in the car that's doing dangerous things, you should be on a full contract because anything could happen. So I thought that with my physical theater skills that doing stunts would be actually a great way to maybe get more acting parts. And that was really why I went into it. I really went into it wanting to get more acting parts and be able to do my own stunts. That was kind of how it happened.
But you did some really dangerous things. Were you always attracted to danger?
I was. I remember, climbing up to the tops of things at very early ages. I was a super tomboy, and they didn't want any girls in the tree fort, but I could climb higher than anyone else. And we had some woods near us, and I used to take my bicycle and race through the trails on the woods and go off these little cliffs. And there was just something awfully exciting about sort of pushing the edge of the envelope, as they say. I kind of didn't like the limitations of, I wanted to fly. I wanted to, be a little superhero. Well,
at least a lot of us would like to do that. We just don't do stunts to get there. and we probably pretty much don't get there.
Well, Annmarie, in my blog on my website, I have a current little series called Fearless Life Lessons from a Stunt Gal. And I talk about that, where each one of us has what I call a threshold of excitement. And I kind of learned this when I was invited to be a guest on a talk show that featured daredevil women and a psychologist. And so it was myself as a stunt woman, it was a female biplane trick pilot, and it was a female race car driver. And someone said, what is it that makes these women do these crazy, dangerous things? And the psychologist talked about this threshold of stimulation where some of us need just if we just think of something, it scares us. And other people can think of all the scary things in the world, and their adrenaline won't get pumping. And so I call it, a 5-alarm. I call myself a 5-alarm a 5-alarm gal. It's like, in order for me to wake up in the morning, I need to set 5 alarms because I'd much rather wake up in the afternoon and stay up late. So, but, maybe you are a silent alarm person who simply thinks of having to wake up at 5 a.m. and you wake up at 5 minutes before. So it's how much stimulation does it take to get our adrenaline pumping? and that adrenaline pump is a thrill. So that...
And as a 5 alarmer, you need a lot of that.
I need a lot of something to get me really get that adrenaline pumping, and so looking to master a very dangerous physical task is definitely something that gets my adrenaline pumping.
Interesting, very interesting. Lisa, we need to take a little break, so but I have so many more questions for you, so everybody stay close, and we're going to talk to Lisa Loving Dalton when we come back. You're listening to the Friday Happy Hour.
Hi, this is Annmarie Kelly, author, victory strategist, and the radio show host of the Friday Happy Hour. I trust you're enjoying my conversation with this fabulous, victorious woman. If you're getting inspired with ideas and feeling empowered, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's more for you. Tips, downloads, resources at the Victorious Woman Project. Go to victoriouswoman.com and look around and get on my mailing list so you can be the first to know about the newest good things I have for you. That's www.victoriouswoman.com.
Welcome back to the Friday Happy Hour. I'm Annmarie Kelly, and I'm here with our guest, Lisa Loving Dalton. And Lisa, before we talk about the stars, I really wanted to ask you this question. If you were a woman doing before I ask you that question, let me ask you this: you were East Coast. There's part of my brain that always thought all the stunt work is done in Hollywood, but it isn't, is it?
Well, there's so much production that has decentralized now and moved out of Hollywood across the country. And so New York and the East Coast has quite a bit of activity going on. In fact, there are times when New York is actually producing more television episodics than Los Angeles, with Atlanta as a hot second or third.
Interesting. Yeah. And we have, right in our area, we have, in Aston, Pennsylvania, we have the Sun Center, and they've been doing some of that work.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm. And of course, in Philly, we have Sharon Pinkinson, and so she's been, she's a good mover and shaker for getting things here in the Philly area.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so that's East Coast, and so how did you end up going West Coast?
Well, I did reach a point where after 8 years, I got really pigeonholed as a stunt player, and I was still all the time an actress and working on stage in New York. And I was growing so strongly in my acting, I became very focused on a particular approach to acting called Michael Chekhov's technique. And I was just getting a lot of messages that I should move on, that I shouldn't be doing stunts, that I should just be focusing on my acting. And then as I tell about in the book, I had 3 stunt friends that were killed in a 4-month period. And that was a big hint that I needed to sort of move on. And so I moved to Los Angeles, and there I didn't acknowledge any of my stunt activity. I just focused on acting, but I was also a comedian in New York and an impersonator and entertaining at gala affairs, bar mitzvahs, and corporate events, and I could make $1,000 over my airfare any given weekend that I wanted, just entertaining at bar mitzvahs. And that was really hard to walk away from. So I flew back 37 times my first 18 months in Los Angeles.
Oh, my goodness.
And whenever I was back there and there was a stunt to do, I took it. So, and it was some of the most exciting things that I did, but because I was now considered one of the top on the East Coast, if not the top, but I knew just spiritually, if you will, that I was not supposed to be doing it. And of course, I went against that one too many times. which did cause a big problem.
Yes, yes. Well, and I want to talk about that, but when you first started in movies, you sort of got your baptism with Neil Diamond.
I did. I was a huge Neil Diamond fan, and when I moved to New York, my aunt and uncle invited me to live with them in Greenwich Village to help me launch my career, and my aunt and I used to dance around the apartment singing to Neil Diamond. And when I got my very first movie, it was as an extra, and I had done some television already, and I was hired because I have light hair, and it was supposed to take place in California, so they wanted a bunch of blondes and strawberry blondes and redheads, which was what I was in that category. And I had to sit in front of Neil Diamond and watch him sing.
Oh, tough job. That's great.
And be paid for it.
Yeah, really. Instead of paying, a couple $100 to watch him, you got paid.
I did.
That's fun. And did you meet him?
I did. Just briefly. But I also, years later, I played in many golf tournaments as a celebrity for raising funds for various charities. And I got to meet him again, and several other wonderful entertainers who would be performing at these special events.
Mm-hmm. That's neat. I know you tell one story about it was Dick Van Dyke and Dick Van Dyke and somebody else. I can't remember the other person.
I was at the Barbara Sinatra celebrity golf tournament, and Dick Van Dyke was there, and Barbara was there, and Angie Dickinson was there, Jack Lemmon was there, and I wanted to talk to Dick because in one of the stunts he fell on my lap. It was a very cool moment with Sid Caesar and Dick Van Dyke, who both fell on my lap, and that was something because they were both idols of mine growing up, and here I am having to make sure that when we all fall down that they don't get hurt. Mm-hmm. And when I wasn't sure these years later if Mr. Van Dyke would remember me or anything like that. I didn't presume he would, but I wanted to talk to him, and the band went on a break, and I finally had a chance to talk to him, and he was so wonderful and generous. And then the band came back, and his knee started wobbling, and he just couldn't stand still, and I finally said, "Dick, would you like to go dance?" He was like, "Yes." So we went out on the dance floor, and all of a sudden the cameras were around us, and we were in the center of the whole crowd, and it was quite fun.
You got to actually dance with Dick Van Dyke.
I did.
That's pretty neat, because he was like the best. He was like what was the superfragilisticexpialidocious movie?
Mary Poppins.
That's right. So he was so fabulous in that.
Yes.
Well, you talk about people that you were particular fans of, and one of them for me was Katharine Hepburn, because at a time when I would watch those shows, when I was 10, 15 years old on television, and she would, she was feisty, and she talked back, and nobody told her what to do, and I think that shaped parts of my brain, and you got to actually be in a film with her.
Yes. It was her last film. It was called Grace Quigley, and I got to meet her. She had to just cross a street, but apparently at a senior level where she almost gets hit, and so they needed to just make sure that we had real good drivers around her in the other cars as she was crossing the street to not hit her. And so I got to drive one of those cars, and I was sitting there watching her stand on the corner. I was like, oh gosh, I wish I could meet her. I had, when I was in college, I had gone up to New York just to see a show of hers that she was in, A Matter of Gravity, and I was so, impressed with her. And all of a sudden, I can't even remember how it happened, but all of a sudden I'm shaking hands with Katharine Hepburn, and she was the only person I felt I lost, like, physical control, because I met so many great stars, and I said, they're just people, that's all, they're just people. No reason to get nervous, no reason to get scared, but I was shaking when I shook her hand, and I was very self-conscious. She was really the only one.
And and that's what intrigued me was what you said in that story where, and I'm quoting you, there are different kinds of fame, and apparently some mean more to me than others. And
yes.
And I think that, I think we all have like a piece of that, don't you?
I do. There's it's kind of funny. It's like that threshold of stimulation I was talking about.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yep.
And apparently she triggered 5 alarms in me.
That's a good one. Lisa, the other one that you met was, it kind of fascinated me because you tell the story about how you were the stunt double for Lucille Ball. You were hired to do that, but she didn't want to. She was 74. She did not want a stunt double.
Yes.
That alone fascinates me that she wouldn't want a stunt double. But what happened?
She did it herself, and I did not do the stunt.
Now, and you write that she was one of the greatest inspirations of your life. Why was that?
Well, she had red hair on TV, and I had bright red hair, almost the same color as Lucille Ball. And she was very clumsy in her I Love Lucy show. Mm-hmm. Everything was always turning into a mess, and that I really identified with. And her comedic timing was so brilliant that she was just, I don't know, she was so funny. And in my household, being funny, being witty, being clever had a high value. There was, you'd insult yourself if it would get a good laugh. And so that, in a sense of comedy, was really important. And Lucille Ball was a very shrewd businesswoman. And she really was a pioneer in the industry. So I identified with the fact that she didn't accept the role, the limitations that were put on other women. Mm-hmm. And she was a funny redhead.
That's pretty neat. Well, it's kind of, and a piece of that is like the same thing with Katharine Hepburn. She didn't accept those limitations either.
Yes.
And and both of them really influenced a whole generation of women, don't you think?
Absolutely, I do. Mm-hmm. Certainly, they influenced me.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I just a couple months ago I saw War Paint with which was about Helena Rubinstein and Elizabeth Arden, and they in the 30s were the same in their fields. They, no other women were heads of big corporations the way that they were. So it's that same kind of thing. Like they were people who influenced the next generation.
Yes. Absolutely. Help pave the way.
Yep. We need to take another break. And then when we come back, I want to talk, first I want to talk about Madonna, but then I want to talk about the price that you paid for your stunt work.
Absolutely.
So everybody hang in there. We'll be right back. You're listening to the Friday Happy Hour.
Are you one of those women who lived the first part of your life as a really good girl? That is, you did all the right things and followed all the so-called rules for women? I was like that too. But have you noticed that once you passed 40, you have less patience for those rules? Maybe you even think that the rules really don't make sense for you anymore. Maybe they never did and you just didn't realize it. Do you want to go where other recovering good girls meet to inspire each other and support their new empowered selves? Then join me, Annmarie Kelly, and some very fabulous Victorious Women. We're on Facebook at the Victorious Woman Project. So go to facebook.com/Victorious Woman Project. I'll talk to you there.
Welcome back to the Friday Happy Hour. I'm Annmarie Kelly, and I'm here with Lisa Loving Dalton, and we're talking about her stunt work. And Lisa, I want to know, you were the material girl. You were just like right up there with Madonna, huh?
Yes, absolutely. I happened to visit one of the film sets that I was working on called The Highlander after I had taken the night off to do an impersonation of Madonna at a party. And I stayed in costume, and when the stunt coordinator who arranges the stunts saw me fully dressed as Madonna, he said, "Oh my gosh, Madonna's going to be doing the season opener of Saturday Night Live, and they need a stunt double, and I'm going to recommend you." And that's how I got to work with Madonna on Saturday Night Live.
Wow.
And Annmarie, I have to say just two so funny things about the two commercials that happened in the two breaks. One of them started with Madonna and Cher, and both of whom I doubled. And then this last one started talking about the Daltons at Gettysburg.
Oh, my goodness.
It's just quite ironic with your advertisers well aligned with our show.
Now, you just mentioned Cher, and you tell a story in Falling for the Stars about a time you doubled for Cher, but years later you saw her someplace.
Yes. And when I worked with her, it was on a film called Suspect, and I was supposed to work 2 weeks, and I was replaced for the second week by a girl who was the girlfriend of a stunt friend of the stunt coordinator. And it really was a misogynistic and inappropriate thing to have happened, because I was hired directly by the very famous award-winning director, Peter Yates. And when I went to say goodbye to Cher after doubling her, she said, "Well, I'll see you next week," after the first week. And then I had to tell her that I was being replaced by somebody else, and she was furious. And she started to storm over to the producer, and I asked her to not risk her own reputation, because this is just sort of the way the stunt industry was at the time. And she really struggled with that and finally agreed. And she was so kind, because she sent me an autographed picture of us together. And then when I ran into her many years later at a party in Hollywood, she was still, we talked for 45 minutes. Uh-huh. And she was just so warm and friendly and supportive. And I just, I really appreciate her. She does a tremendous amount of philanthropy, especially in Africa, and for poverty. And a lot of people just have no idea that she's really an amazing woman.
Who are some of your favorites?
Well, Meryl Streep, of course, was quite amazing. She also stood up for me when they tried to get me to do a stunt falling about a 15-foot fall onto my face, and do it on a photo double contract instead of or a voucher instead of a stunt contract. And she left before I got a chance to say goodbye to her, but before I left, the makeup artist grabbed me and said, "I want you to know, Meryl made sure you had your contract before she left the set."
Nice.
And I just thought that was really nice.
Yeah.
And Robert Redford, who had to knock me down like 7 times in Legal Eagles. And he was, A, of course, so gorgeous, but B, he came up after each take and said, "How are you? Are you okay? Is there anything you want me to do differently?" And he was just so concerned, interested, aware. I really appreciated that.
Nice. Well, Lisa, you had a great career, but then you paid a price, and how you say, psychologically, emotionally, and physically. What happened?
Well, after I quit, as I mentioned earlier, I decided not to go back to New York anymore, and I got a plane ticket to fly back to hire movers to close out my apartment. And while I was packing to go, I got a call from my friends in New York who were, "Lisa, we need you. We love you. And, it's just this little job rappelling off this cliff. And it's very interesting. The girl who was supposed to do it's going to be in L.A. and you're going to be in New York. And it's easy, very easy. It'll just pay the regular rate, no additional amount, just $431. But that'll probably cover the airfare you paid. So why not? We need you. You're the best. And that really was my kryptonite. The rope slipped off, wasn't anchored properly, and slipped off the edge of the cliff, and I crashed, ricocheting back and forth between two sides of the cliff. And I knew, really, Annmarie, right then, as I was ricocheting back and forth, I heard this voice that said, "This is the greatest spiritual gift you will ever give yourself."
Wow.
And I heard it, I knew it, I was very calm, and it was. I wound up with a 46% permanent loss of use of my back, in chronic pain for 24 years. Couldn't sit for more than 5 minutes without being in severe pain, or walk, or just, it was very difficult. There were periods of time, a month at a time, when I was completely bedridden, couldn't move. And I went from, Superman and Madonna to an invalid. And I really had to find my way back through, because the medical community said, don't do surgery until you just can't exist, because it may paralyze you, it won't guarantee relief from the pain, and it's just too dangerous. And wait till the techniques get better. And so I lived with that, severe pain probably every 5 minutes, and hovering around, pain level 5 or 6 at a chronic level. But I learned, I discovered when I was teaching the Michael Chekhov work that I wasn't in pain, and I wound up traveling all over the world teaching the work. It's very powerful, spiritually uplifting, healing work. And I learned all sorts of things about alternative healing processes, pain management, because I wasn't going to do drugs to manage the pain. And so through many alternative approaches, meditation, neurolinguistic programming, and all sorts of various psychological and spiritual activity, that I learned how to function very well. And I was fortunate. I did have a wonderful career as an actress, and Los Angeles was very supportive. I did hundreds of commercials, and I did TV shows like ER and Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman, Melrose Place, other movies and things like that. And I really just fell in love with the work with my teaching.
And that's how you just created that next chapter. And you know what, Lisa, one of the things is you draw a comparison between being a stunt double and living your life. And you say that we all have an inner stunt player. Would you explain that?
Yes, we do. Well, if we think of our life as a movie, we write our own life. We write our own life story, and we cast it. We bring into our life who we want, and we relate to them, and each part of us has to deal with the different aspects, especially the fear aspect. And so you have an inner stunt woman, each of us does, or a stunt man if you're a man, or maybe you have a stunt man and you're a woman. It's non-gendered there. You have a stunt player in you who is willing to look at the dangers, the things that you fear, and give you the courage and lead you into the way to deal with it. Like if you're a deer, fighting is not what you want. You've got long legs that will move you very quickly. And if you're a turtle, you want to go into a shell because you've got teeny little legs that won't move you very far. But if you're a lion, then you want to spring forward and fight. So you want to look at who you are, what your nature is like, and you want to check into how you can be like a stunt player and analyze the potential dangers, look at the ways that you can operate that will allow you to move through them very quickly and safely and efficiently.
And you say that our fears are sending us messages, and so that we can use to inspire us in a healthy way. How can we do that?
Absolutely. There are times when fear is actually connected to an intuition that's guiding you to go towards something or away from something. And if you look at it and see what is my true fear, for example, if your husband comes home late at night and forgot to call you and you start yelling at him, it's actually because you're afraid something went wrong.
Right.
And if his phone died and he didn't have a chance to get to you, or if his phone fell in the water and he couldn't call you and tell you, the last thing he needs is to be yelled at because he didn't call you to say he was going to be late. And you don't actually want to yell at him. Your fear is that something went wrong, and when he walks through the door, you're actually happy. You're no longer afraid.
So the good thing to say is, I was so worried something had happened to you. I'm so glad you're here. Like that.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because when we don't understand we're afraid, we get mad instead of, we often don't realize we're actually scared. It turns into anger because sometimes it's easier to handle anger than admit or recognize fear.
Lisa, this was good stuff and just not enough time for today, and we're going to need to go. But I want my listeners to know that I posted links to your website, and I haven't done it yet because I didn't have my internet, but this morning. But you have some really good blog posts that talk about that threshold of stimulation and the fear and everything that we just talked about, and that's on at the radio wrap up at victoriouswoman.com. And you have some fun things. You're going to Nashville in September and Dallas in October, Florida in November.
Yes, it's very exciting. They can see everything at lisadalton.com, and I'd love to hear from people. So post comments or connect with me on Facebook, and I just love to communicate and connect with fans.
That's great, Lisa. Thank you so much for coming to Happy Hour today.
Thank you, Annmarie. It was just delightful.
Have a great weekend.
You too.
Thank you. Geez, that went fast, didn't it? Well, I don't know what you're up to this weekend. I don't have anything particular planned, Joseph, and I have stuff to do around the house, but nothing big. So maybe we'll check out Rose Tree Park. The festival this year is almost over. I think this is next to the last week. So maybe if you're looking for something to do, Rose Tree Park on 252. And don't forget, next Thursday is our Westchester First Thursday Summer Block Party in town. So maybe I will see you there. And so, and for us, we have, I'm hoping tonight, it's supposed to rain tonight. I was just saying that a couple of minutes ago that I was hoping Joseph and I would be able to walk into town and have a couple of drinks, but if it's raining, I think we probably won't do that. So maybe we'll just have a movie night tonight. Whatever you're doing, I hope you're doing something fun, and whatever you're doing, have a fabulous weekend. And I will talk to you next week. Please come back. Thanks for coming today. Please come back next week. And I'll talk to you then at the Friday Happy Hour. Jen's on.
Thanks for listening to this Friday Happy Hour. Make sure you subscribe, rate and review today's show. And join us again next week for the Friday Happy Hour with Annmarie Kelly.